Well, thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Andrew Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of Outrider. And with me here today is Arshan Poursohi, and I am thrilled to hear more about Third Wave and all you're doing inside the warehouse. Arshan, with everything going on in the supply chain these days, share a little bit more about what Third Wave is doing with automation inside the warehouse.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Happy to. So in short, we're automating the forklifts. We really saw this as being kind of the heart of the warehouse. And when we were starting the company, we went out and talked to a few operators and saw what these machines were doing in these environments. And they're just fantastic. They've been around for 100 years and a great target for automation. The way that we're building the tech is, I think, kind of interesting in that we know that the world is unpredictable. And so instead of trying to solve all the cases right up front, we build a system that knows it's not always going to know. So the robot can ask for help when it needs to. We call it shared autonomy. And basically, as opposed to some of the other folks that were building really constrained cases where they can do what, lights out warehousing is a oft repeated phrase for these goals. But we just acknowledge that there's going to be people involved, at least for a long while. And so build a system that's robust. It can deal with these things. And just ask for help when it needs to. And the great thing about modern computing, modern machine learning, is that when you ask for help, you get the help. You can actually learn from it, and the system just gets better over time and remains flexible. So we're pretty excited about it, and it's going well so far. I'd love to know, we're inside the warehouse, Andrew. What are you guys doing out there on the outside of the doors?
Well, certainly everything you're doing is totally inspiring, and I'm sure it's very related. So it's great to have this conversation. To put it simply, we're focused on automating outside the warehouse. So what Outrider does is we automate everything about that space about the space between the warehouse door and what happens with over-the-road vehicles. And by doing that, we can deliver higher levels of efficiency, safety, and sustainability to our customers. Just like you commented about having people in the loop, essentially, it's a very similar system. We can execute all of the key tasks in a yard autonomously. So that means connecting to trailers, moving to trailers, backing trailers to loading docks. But we can also do that in a way that has a layer of management software over the top of it so that people can understand when there is an issue within these controlled warehouse environments. So really an extremely related field. And I think there's a lot of things we can talk about how that links together. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about where you see the future of the warehouse? Because I could certainly see a warehouse with automation both inside and outside its doors.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. We talk to a lot of potential customers, try and build the product the way that they want it, not the way that we want it necessarily. And so there's some baselines. You talk to people and they want, a certain number of pallets moved per hour. Safety, of course, is always important. You have to assume that in these systems, I think. But what's interesting to me, the more veteran operators that we talk to, they're not interested so much in the speed numbers as much as sort of the reliability and predictability numbers. So delivering the right pallet at the right time is important, as opposed to getting it there 20 miles an hour or getting it there 10 miles an hour. It's important that it be there at the right time. And so that's one of the great things about automation. There's more predictability in these legs of the system, which of course, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, pushes on where these systems come together. So this is the interesting part of talking to you, is that we actually have a contact point through the door there. And so if we can organize it well, the whole system will work a lot better. And then this goes, again, back to this notion of human in the loop, which is that unexpected things happen all the time. It's expected that your pallets are deteriorating, little mechanical widgets fail, payloads start leaning over or whatever, and the robot can't constrain the environment so much that it's just not functional for normal people. For the flexibility is needed there, and so that's what we concentrated on roughly. I'd love to know, on your side. So we get to these interstitials, and we want to interact with your team. What kind of things are you guys working on?
That's great. So, well, one of the things that got me excited about your system as well, that it's an all-electric system, and certainly when we saw all the challenges that were taking place outside the door of the warehouse, and what the yard of the distribution yard of the future would look like, it was clear that there was a need for automation to get people out of an unsafe environment where you have 80,000-pound pieces of equipment. There was a need to dramatically increase levels of productivity so you didn't have congestion of the over-the-road trucks trying to get to these warehouses. And there was a need to address some of the inefficiencies that just exist with having big diesel trucks outside the door, sitting around idling, waiting to move a trailer from point to point. So like your system that's all electric and providing additional safety and efficiency outside, we layered our automation on top of electric yard trucks to move trailers around the yard and know where they are at any one point. What's interesting, I'd be interested to learn more about your direction there, but getting people away from emissions is obviously a great goal, but also there's higher levels of reliability with electric yard truck platforms than there are with diesel truck platforms. You don't have to adhere to emission standards because you aren't giving anything else off. And so we saw that platform as a much more efficient platform to layer automation on top of. And I believe that that is a one step closer to having a fully zero emission distribution yard for shared customers that we have. Talk to me a little bit about when you think about integrating these systems for your customers. What are other pieces of advice that you have with your customers about how they deploy a system like this?
Yeah. So these are not trivial investments they're making, either in just cash, but also in the time, resources, and everything they put into this. And so keeping them flexible. And again, it goes back to these interstitials. So we're working on, and there's other automation companies working on making each leg of this thing more efficient and more predictable. But where it comes together, making sure that it's flexible, so that the when the requests come in, you deal with them quickly, and when the outcome isn't quite, the inputs and the outputs are always very complicated, and you don't want to change on one part of your system to affect everything downhill. So it's making each component flexible enough to deal with the changes that happen every day. Seems super important. And when we talk to the more veteran operators, they all seem to agree on this, that you don't want to call out a whole engineering team just because you have some new kind of pallet coming in. In our case, I'm sure in your case, it's slightly different. But for us, these little changes that happen kind of constantly, and what humans historically are just fantastic at dealing with. You want to make sure that the automation systems are, try and be as good. And again, just to plug shared autonomy one more time, actually, it can ask for help if the pallets have changed and it looks slightly different than it did yesterday. There's no reason it can't still pick it up. It just has to make sure that it's safe before it does it. And then hopefully learn from it too.
It's such a good point, and I think the modularity of the system is so critically important because each warehouse, each distribution yard is going to look a little bit different. So having those modular components that are extremely reliable with the ability to give help to them is a big deal. And Arshan, just touching on that subject again, early on, the idea of assisting a robotic system is a great idea, but the idea that someone has to teleoperate every single move seems like a very inefficient way of not really solving the problem. And so if I'm correct, your system operates like ours, that if there's ways you can give help without having to have armies of trained people doing exactly what the forklift guys would be doing anyway in the warehouse. Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. And it's an interesting feature in that a lot of what you do as a forklift operator now is not that hard to do. The bulk of it is just making sure you don't hit anything. And so computers are very good at that. But then when it comes to making those decisions that humans are best at, you want to provide, and this is where the remote op comes in really handy, actually, is making those decisions at the times when they're required. And so I don't know how you guys' system works actually on this. Do you have a similar setup for that?
Well, exactly. We really leverage the human in the loop, that our goal is always to have our system do as much of that work on a daily basis as humanly possible. But no robots are perfect. So you have to be able to address those issues. And we have built in systems to know about problems before that dispatcher even knows about them from our remote operating system overseeing multiple our vehicles in multiple places. So very similar that way.
Yeah, and it's
Any other?
interesting as these systems get more and more automated. The people are collecting telemetry actually as its own goal right now, and with these systems, the telemetry comes built in, and so you can imagine these meta things happening afterwards. So after, let's assume a warehouse has Outrider on the outside and Third Wave on the inside. you're going to start building this corpus of data that helps you make better decisions about how to get more bandwidth in general through the whole building. Um, and so I'm looking forward, I guess, to when our two systems can work together, and keep building on this.
What are some of the things that have your customers most excited these days?
One of the things that sets us apart is doing Highbay pick and place. And this is important because you want to make sure, and this is what I was going to earlier a little bit. You want to make sure that when it gets to the end point, it's not something that it can't accomplish itself. Because if it goes through all the trouble of getting there, and then at the end you just need a human to be standing there in order to put the pallet away, then the machine isn't doing a fantastic job. And so being able to pick it up at the dock, go all the way to wherever in the warehouse you want to put it, whether it be on the floor or high up in a rack, and be able to robustly do that, and super safe. This is the other thing that's nice about these human in the loop systems, is that the human's not there when it's doing a lot of the dangerous work, frankly. So in the case of a forklift, it's the most dangerous in a warehouse place to be, is sitting on the forklift itself. And it's just built into the nature of it. You're moving a 1-ton load out of a rack that's 30 feet up in the air. There's no way to make it perfectly safe, but you can make it so that there's no humans nearby, so that if something does happen, it's a machine that takes the hit, not the human.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people don't think about. It's not just the functionality of the system, but it's the functionality of the system 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we both are dealing with large equipment. I think we've got you by a few additional pounds, but you have even more people working around here. So yeah, when we've got 80,000 pounds of equipment moving autonomously, we want to keep people away from that. We want the system to be intrinsically safe. And it's a pretty exciting future where you can dramatically bring down the accidents that take place in these dangerous logistics environments. So I will look forward to seeing the statistics inside and outside the warehouse coming down as we go forward. Arshan, tell me a little bit more about the technology you bring to market. It's incredible. Tell me more about the team that you put together to bring warehouse automation to life.
Yeah, it's me and my two co-founders, James and Mac. We've been building robots for ages, all sorts of robots. We always like to give the story of underwater robots, satellites. Between the three of us, we've done literally every kind of robot there's to know. And we were talking to each other about getting some of the prototypes that we built out into the real world, where it can actually affect things, make people safer, actually have a good impact on the world, as opposed to just really fancy lab robots that end up sitting in a closet and you talk about 10 years later, I guess, like I am now. And so we took a look around, and forklifts are this fantastic use case for a robot. It's not so, all three of us had done some work in the autonomous vehicle space on the road, on cars. And there, it's really interesting, but the horizon is really far out. And just like I was saying, we don't want to build another thing that doesn't have an impact for a long time, even if that impact is going to be huge, clearly. So we looked at the forklifts. Not only is it an autonomous vehicle problem in the sense that you have to drive it around from point A to point B, but also it's a manipulation problem, which got us really excited. So you have to not only try not to touch the world at all costs, which is basically what autonomous vehicles are trying to do on the road, you also have to make a decision about when to touch the world. And that's something that the three of us know we could pull off in a way that would be hard to follow, shall we say, for our potential competitors. And so we built the system out. We started talking to customers, and we were just super excited by the way the technology was developing. And so far, it's just been fantastic. I'm curious, your team, how'd you get Outrider started? I know you have a bit of a history in this sort of space as well.
So yeah, my background in the trucking industry was looking first at actually not in what was happening in distribution yards, but what was happening over the road trucking, and we saw that there was a lot of trailers being moved around the country, and it turns out the worst shape to move down the highway from an aerodynamics and fuel efficiency standpoint is a big rectangular box, but that's what everybody ships cargo in. And so my first company was building more aerodynamic semi-trailers to save fuel economy. But in that process, I spent a lot of time in distribution yards and was involved with a number of robotics companies and automation companies in the early days, and realized yards were this perfect place for automation because it was a confined environment, defined moves of these yard trucks moving trailers around a yard, and tons of pain points. So people were misplacing trailers. The over-the-road trucks were getting into congestion, trying to come in and out of these yards. Trailers weren't where they needed to be so that the forklifts could even unload them. And we realized that we could bring together autonomy in this application and automate not just what trucks do, but all the other manual tasks that people do in these yards. So, from a team standpoint, it's a very unique team we pulled together. Our core autonomy team was a group that had been doing autonomous vehicles for over 15 years and actually led most of the Department of Defense autonomous vehicle programs over the last decade. They saw this use case as the perfect place for autonomy, so they came on board. And then we had to complement that with deep expertise and manipulation to do things like connect the trucks to the trailers, as well as deep logistics experiences to make sure that these autonomous vehicles are doing exactly what you need them to do when you want them to do it, and integrate with warehouse management or yard management systems. So really unique team. There's over 100 people that all they do on a daily basis is work on reinventing what that yard of the future looks like. I'll say one other thing about team that I think is so relevant to anyone in this space is it's not just about building the product, but making sure it's a really streamlined way to deploy it with customers. And I'm sure you guys think a lot about that, these modular systems, these super durable systems that allow people to deploy them with little disruption to their operations and get all the benefits of autonomy.
Yeah, and to keep doing that even. So it's not just the install process, but you want the lifetime of the product to be really fantastic for our customers. So as you know, I drone on about this, I guess, but things in the real world change a lot. You change the layout in the yard as well as in the warehouse, I'm sure, and you want to make sure that the system can flexibly deal with that. Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And with most of these customers too, most of these customers don't have one factory or one warehouse only. This is something that they want to have go across their network as quickly as possible. And looking forward, I think that's the really exciting thing is everyone knows this automation is coming, and so it's a question of who's going to get the competitive advantage up front by deploying it early and quickly across their networks. From your perspective, 5 years from now, talk about how new and different is automation going to be 5 years from now, or do you think this is just going to be the new standard?
Yeah, I totally think it'll be the new standard. One of our investors likes to say that in 10 years you'd be insane not to have a system like this, and it really is true. The changes that have been coming through robotics, and you see it all over the news, of course, with again autonomous cars being the highlight there. But what those bring, the economics that those bring to market, really make forklifts automation indoors much more cost effective, much safer, and more efficient, just for a better system. We've seen all of this stuff happening recently with pressures on the supply chain. And sorry,
You're
go on.
No, I was just going to say you're probably seeing what we're seeing too in terms of there's a lot of people that got caught up in the dream of the robo taxi, which is still very exciting and there's great progress. But we are having tons of engineers that are eager to get equipment, autonomous vehicles and equipment into real world application coming from those autonomous vehicle companies that maybe aren't moving as quickly and looking to work on things like forklifts and yard trucks, et cetera. And you must be feeling that as well as people realize these near term immediate opportunities for real world automation.
Yeah, and it really is rewarding to as an engineer, as an entrepreneur. It really is rewarding to see the thing that you're working on actually have a real effect. And it's hard to beat, frankly, when you can see that running in a real system.
I'm always highly aware that the folks that do logistics in my last company, we always had a joke. If you do your job well, then people leave you alone, maybe give you a pat in the back, but they get really upset when things don't work. So we're being very focused on helping the people that run these operations have easier night's sleep as they deal with these very intense daily operations, especially with everything going on with supply chains now.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Is there any other impacts that the pandemic has had on your business?
Um, Near term, it made a few things harder for us. At the end of the day, we are developers. We had to go in and try and get work done, even though we're work from home or we have to socially distance. We are seeing a lot of our customers are even more interested. Is the truth. They see where their supply chain broke, the parts that they were a little bit more dependent on what was going on around them than they are comfortable with, and they're looking to automate those sections. Um, and so I imagine your situation is roughly the same. You're seeing people wanting to help with the social distancing roughly in the short term, but then build a more reliable system.
Absolutely. There was that sort of short period of no one knew what was happening, and then the tremendous impact on e-commerce growth is certainly not something that's going to slow down at all in the foreseeable future. So, lots of interest in getting people away from having to touch lots of pieces of equipment. A lot of focus on just supporting the sheer volume of certain products going through these supply chains all of a sudden. So yes, we've, while the pandemic has been this horrible thing in so many ways, certainly on the supply chain, it's driving even more innovation in this space, and we certainly expect that to continue. Any other challenges for you before all the people watching this place their orders to deploy autonomous forklifts in the warehouse?
You know, keeping up with customer demand is a challenge. Humble brag. We really are with the COVID stuff going on. We're getting a lot of people asking us for how soon can we deliver this thing. And at the end of the day, we're a smaller company and we're building up. So we'd love to fill every request that comes in the door.
Yeah,
But we
for those
can't.
customers that are interested in working with you, how does Third Wave think about the best customers to work with? Because certainly we've had the same thing. We've been with the Fortune 200 companies we're working with. We've been very selective in getting the right use cases, but most importantly, some of the right team members on these big companies, because it takes a partnership to really scale this technology quickly. What are the profile of your perfect customers, and what can these big companies do to be be good partners with you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The interacting with the right team on the other side, it turns out, we're trying to serve a common use case. So there's plenty of opportunities for that. But having the right team on the other side of the video chat nowadays is super important for us. And it's actually the companies that are easier to deal with here have people dedicated to almost just impedance matching from the scales where we work, as currently a 20-person company and growing, to where some of these companies we're dealing with, 20,000 people. Um, and so I couldn't agree with you more on having the right set of people on the other side of the table. And we found a few great folks that we're very very happy working with. And when I Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. No, I think the key thing from our standpoint is recognizing that these are the core operations of these companies. So when you start ramping up, taking over facilities, being able to put people at ease that these systems work and can support them is a huge piece of it. But laying the groundwork ahead of time to make sure everybody's aligned and there's the right support on both sides of that equation is critical to making one of these deployments successful.
And I guess with that, should we close up or?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think just my last thoughts is any other thoughts for the future from your side?
Well, getting these fleets out there and seeing them get better and better. So right now, what we're shooting for is one operator being able to manage sort of 10 of these forklifts, and seeing the fleets grow and learn. That number will naturally kind of rise, and I can't wait to see the stats on that. How about yourself? What future things are you looking forward to?
I think as with any innovation curve taking place today, what we're talking about seems like crazy next generation technology. My expectation is that in a few years, it would be absolutely crazy to be operating a warehouse in a yard that wasn't autonomous, electrified, and much safer than it is today. So it'll be fun to go down that path.
Yeah, cheers. I'll be there with you. So I guess with that, say goodbye. Thank you, FreightWaves, for hosting us, and thanks everybody who's watching. And don't forget, I mean, I think clearly Andrew and I love talking about this stuff. So don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. I know I'd love to answer any questions. I always learn from those interactions.
Thanks everybody for their time.